Hey team, how's it going? Now, when I joined the Royal Marines a whopping 13 years ago now, the knowledge and education on how to get physically prepared was absolutely shocking. Just do loads of press-ups, pull-ups, and run a lot. All right, cool, cheers for that. I do think overall it is a lot better now, but a lot of my friends that are still in and actually taking recruits through training say that overall it's still pretty old school. They might now actually see that there is a benefit to doing a warm-up and a cool-down, instead of just screaming at recruits telling us to shut up, stop suggesting fancy things, and just go stretch in the shower.
I will PT you all until you die! I'll PT you until your asshole for buttermilk!
And since starting this channel, I've actually been really surprised and really chuffed with how many bootneck hopefuls and actually all-round military hopefuls have come to me and asked for my advice on how to get fit, because they acknowledge that the information that they're being offered by kind of the conventional services are actually super old school. Some of the first videos I did on this channel were about exactly this, how to get physically prepared for the military. But today I want to talk about something that's coming into my awareness more and more, and that is the link between CrossFit and military prep. Is it good or bad? What are the pros? What are the cons? And overall, should it be used as a kind of a guideline training methodology for someone that is in the run-up to joining military training? Well, let's have a chat about some of the points on both sides and let's find out. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Jim Galvin, and on this channel we cover all things training, nutrition, biohacking and ancestral living to help you guys work out what you need to do based on your individual biology to help you improve your performance, your health and your physique. And today I want to talk about whether or not CrossFit is an appropriate training methodology and practice to help people get ready for any part of the military service. Okay, so as mentioned in a lot of my previous content, let's start this discussion with kind of a two-sentence preface right now. I am not a CrossFitter and I do not follow the CrossFit methodology myself. And secondly, I love CrossFit, I love watching it, and I think overall the methodology, basically what they actually do and the way that it's delivered, has done wonders for tens of thousands of people worldwide. All the pros, all the cons, all the good stuff, all the bad stuff, all into one pot. My overall assessment, taking into consideration everything, is that CrossFit comes out incredibly net positive. And a big part of my reasoning for this is down to CrossFit's unbelievable ability to kind of nurture and cultivate and foster small clusters of communities in their CrossFit boxes that help empower people in a way that 1,000,001 other fitness styles are just nowhere near as good at. It creates this culture and this community that a lot of people say is kind of cult-like. In certain ways, I do kind of agree with that, but at the end of the day, who cares? Like, people are genuinely happier because they are invested in this thing, and it does wonders to kind of mitigate the boredom and confusion and intimidation of trying to navigate the tumultuous world of fitness alone. But that is not what I want to talk about today. Today, I want to talk about whether or not it's an appropriate methodology for people prepping for the forces. So to investigate this, let's first look at what CrossFit aspires to actually do. Develop all components of fitness together. Are all components of fitness required for military training and military service? Yes, so far so good, right? So next, let's look at how CrossFit does this. The sport of CrossFit can be seen by a layman, like myself, to basically be split into three different sections. Gymnastics, or anything body weight, weightlifting, which includes kind of a plethora of different strength modalities, and conditioning work, or cardio, or aerobic, or metcon, or whatever you want to call it. Are all of these things required for military service? Yes. So far so good. But here's the question I really want to ask. Is the way that CrossFit attempts to develop these three different components conducive with military preparation? And is there anything that CrossFit does frequently that military preppers might deliberately want to avoid? My personal assessment of this: there are a few things, yeah. Overall, the pursuit of trying to develop your body weight strength endurance is absolutely vital, as is trying to develop an improvement in absolute strength as well. In fact, to date, now is the beginning of November 2021, and so far my most popular YouTube video ever is on why people prepping for the Royal Marines should absolutely incorporate weight training and maximum strength training into their training in the run-up. So we know they need good body weight training, gymnastic stuff, we know they need good kind of maximal strength work, and in terms of aerobic and like cardiovascular stuff, we obviously know that's going to be beneficial as well. But let's take these three pursuits one at a time, with bodyweight stuff or gymnastics being the first one. They do lots of press-ups, great. They do burpees, great. They do strict pull-ups as well, great. I don't really have a massive problem with kipping pull-ups either. I'm aware that they're not strict pull-ups and they won't develop your vertical pulling power as well as strict, but to me it's just a different variation, which is fine. I don't do them, but I don't care. I'm not sure how much they'd actually help develop strict pull-up movements, but I don't think they do any harm. Bodyweight squats or air squats are great. Lunges are great. Overall, fairly consistent, and all this stuff should help and shouldn't be too harmful. Handstand walks, maybe less relevant. Maybe learn some sprint mechanics and running gait and breathing rhythm first. In no uncertain terms, you're going to be spending a lot more time both in military service and in life on your feet than you are on your hands. So that's gymnastic stuff done. Overall, the way that CrossFit delivers their training for the pursuit of improved bodyweight strength, cool. Next, onto strength work and weightlifting. CrossFit love Olympic lifting. This is no secret. This is a funny one for me, right? So as to whether or not clean and jerk and snatch variations are a good tool for developing strength and power for the general population, maybe. One of my most recent videos was on literally exactly this topic, so I'm not going to bother recounting all of that stuff now for you. If mobility and technique and the movement pattern grooved is adequate, then it can be an appropriate tool. But if you just start attacking this stuff straight away without the appropriate mobility, technique, and movement pattern, it can put a hell of a lot of pressure on your joints, your tissues, and your systems. And if you spent 6 months learning the basics of how to get this movement pattern nailed, as you would probably need to, I believe that time frame is probably the minimum required to get decent enough that this becomes an appropriate tool. That's 6 months that you've invested that you could have been doing other stuff to actually get strong and powerful from the off, with movement patterns that are just as good to develop these components, but nowhere near as technically demanding. In terms of the other strength lifts that CrossFit endorse, in theory, CrossFit is everything, so it could be anything, but they do a lot of overhead pressing work, which I personally think is absolutely fantastic. Horizontal push work, basically kind of heavy bench pressing, I think is extremely beneficial as well. And probably horizontal bench pressing seems to have a strangely bad name in the CrossFit world anyway, as an unfunctional movement. I'm not really sure why. I also don't see an awful lot of horizontal pull work done at kind of maximal stuff. I know I know different heavy row variations with barbells and dumbbells will be used as kind of a supplementary auxiliary exercise, but I actually think maximal pull work can be really good, and vertical pull stuff in terms of in terms of pull-ups and different pull-up variations. Again, everyone seems to be a massive fan of using these movements and putting them basically into high rep sets, but I don't see that much in the world of CrossFit really. Any kind of heavily loaded, heavily laden pull-ups, if you could work your way up to a 3 rep max with a weight belt on, as an example. I don't see an awful lot of that in CrossFit, not to say it's not being done, but I think I could see more, because I do personally believe that would be incredibly beneficial if you're prepping for the forces. Something like an overhead squat as an example, which I kind of see strangely as a hybrid move, somewhere in between conventional compound movement and an Olympic lifting variation. Something like an overhead squat variation I think is kind of a little bit pointless unless you're prepping for a CrossFit or functional fitness competition. But if purely your goal is to get fit for the forces, I don't think an overhead squat is really necessary. And with standard squats, CrossFit is a massive fan of ask the grass stuff, and I am fairly dubious, as you will know if you've seen any of my content on YouTube or Instagram recently, as to whether or not that is necessary or healthy for everyone. I'm not saying they're not good and they're bad for everyone, but depending on how you're built, something like an appropriate depth box squat could be a hell of a lot better for your hip joints than arse to grass squats. Again, the goal is not to reach week 1, day 1 of training and be the fittest and strongest there. This is a hugely common misconception. The goal is to be fit enough to do everything that you need to do at a good standard, but also be ready and fit and healthy enough to continue with the next 32 weeks of incredibly physically challenging and arduous work without picking up any injuries or niggles or hitting burnout. This is something about military prep overall that unfortunately seems very underrated and undercommunicated, which is why I'm sharing it with you now, because I do think it's vital to say. Again, you do not want to be peaking and the fittest you've ever been week 1, day 1. The people who do this are infinitely more likely to have something go ping by week 10. Okay, so that is the strength stuff done. And now let's look at conditioning. Depending on whether or not the kind of CrossFit stuff that you do is either individual based or team based, would dictate whether or not most of your conditioning work is either steady state, as it would be with individual work, or whether or not it has a certain work to rest ratio, a little bit more like interval training, which is more common in kind of team CrossFit WODs. I'm a big fan of overall doing them both. Some steady state work runs up to about 3 miles. I personally personally don't think you need to be doing any more than this on the run up to bootleg training. I would personally rather rock up to CTC or Catterick or Sandhurst or wherever, being able to run a rapid 2K rather than 15K at a steady state, which you're not even going to need to do for a few weeks or months anyway. It's all in all extremely beneficial to kind of mix up this steady state work with different work to rest ratio, interval work, and kind of like sprint modalities. I've done a separate video on this as well, so I won't go into too much detail now, but overall the work to rest ratios that I like to vary are 1-to-1, so basically like it could be like 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. 1-to-2, which is like 30 seconds on, 1 minute off, which is, you know, might sound like you're not doing anything. Trust me, that 30 seconds should feel long because you're going full ham. Or 2-to-1, so like a minute on the rower as an example, and then just sit there for 30 seconds, recover, and then go again. It can be a lot more complicated than that, but overall those 3 work to rest ratios, if you kind of vary your interval sprints around them, mixing that stuff, kind of combining that with some steady state through the week as well, you're golden. I also think the inclusion of certain bits of erg kit, like rowing machines, Concept 2 bike ergs, ski ergs, assault bikes, that kind of thing, I think that the inclusion of them in your training program is fantastic to take a little bit of pressure off the joints, but still building aerobic capacity and lactic tolerance. So I think that's amazing on the run up to the military, as opposed to just flipping running on the road and smashing your joints all the time. So the fact that they're used so frequently and the kind of the conditioning portion of CrossFit in like the Metcon stuff, I think is amazing. I think the same about integrating certain kind of like low level bodyweight exercises, like just bodyweight squats, press ups, kind of like hanging knee tucks or toes to bar or something like that in their conditioning stuff. I think the fact that that conditioning is considered both the purely aerobic stuff and some of the bodyweight stuff at high reps, I think that putting those 2 together is amazing and will set you up very well. But I do have a couple of gripes, 2 that I'm going to share with you now, about the way that CrossFit integrate a couple of different things into their conditioning program. Any kind of Olympic lifting variation with a barbell, touch and go or not, is very emotionally triggering for me. And my advice is this: if you are prepping for the forces, this should be avoided at all costs, especially anything snatch based. It is dangerous enough when you are doing these kind of movements fully rested, let alone when you are gasping for air, you haven't properly braced, and you're going for time and it's touch and go. Even though the bar might be lighter, all you are doing with high rep stuff is giving your body more exposure to groove bad movement patterns. It is flipping crazy. Even deadlifts, when touch and go in a conditioning workout, are sketchy enough. I don't really know how I feel about them actually, because I have done them and I've been okay, but luckily I've had kind of quite a lot of exposure to this stuff and I know how to brace and I know how to breathe. But if you don't, and you're not breathing properly, either into a belt or not, and you're not bracing properly, and if one side of the kind of, you know, half the plate, so half the bar, one side of the bar hits the ground first before the other, even if they hit exactly the same time, just putting an unbelievable amount of pressure through your lower back. The whole flipping purpose of a deadlift is that you're lifting from a dead start, right? The amount of eccentric load that goes through your lower back when those plates hit the ground are absolutely massive, let alone if your breathing isn't kind of synchronized with that movement. And even though you might be able to do it and it looks cool and it looks gnarly, you might not necessarily experience the effects or the symptoms of that now. But you fast forward a couple of months when you're in the middle of a flipping exercise at week 15 of commando training, and all of those little touch and go deadlifts suddenly start to aggravate your back, you're screwed, mate. And my second gripe for CrossFit's conditioning methodology is when they include a particular exercise in some of their long workouts. And that exercise is, drum roll please, box jumps. With my background in my younger days being a sprinter, a long jumper and decathlete, and then after the Marines, basically being part of the Team GB bobsleigh team, it's probably no surprise to anyone that I absolutely love this kind of power training, and I flipping love plyometrics. You've seen it in some of the B-roll in here. If you follow me on Instagram, which you should do, you would have seen it on there as well. I love reactive jumps. I love different plyometric variations. They make me feel strong, they make me feel powerful, and I think they're an incredible way of developing elasticity and true raw athleticism, right? Maintaining appropriate position and form when taking off is absolutely vital, as is developing the ability to control the massive eccentric force of a landing. This is something that should be learned properly when you're doing these for like a set of 5, when you're flipping fresh as a daisy. Incurring this much eccentric force regularly for super high reps and in a conditioning workout when you're tired and losing form is why so many CrossFitters that I know have huge scars on the front of their shins. Or a couple I know personally have fully ruptured an Achilles tendon in the process of doing this exercise. And there are those that might say, yeah, but we need to get used to impact, right? And I kind of get that in theory, and I get the logic of that, but I'm going to counter that with 2 different points. Number 1, you need to get used to impact in things like running. We do not take off from both feet and land on both feet on a super flipping hard as nails surface too regularly in life. And the second thing is this, again, kind of relating this to one of my earlier points. You need to get used to an appropriate amount of impact so you can handle week 1, day 1. You do not need to turn up at CTC ready for test week. I have a certain perspective on strength and conditioning. And again, certain CrossFit Puritans will have a slightly different perspective to me. Overall, I believe that CrossFit is unbelievably net positive. I'm incredibly grateful personally and professionally that it does exist. And overall, I think that it is very good for the fitness world. But high rep plyometrics being used as a tool for cardio, I believe is crazy and dangerous, and I hate it for that reason. And my advice for any budding military hopefuls out there is 100% stay away from that. So, all in all, CrossFit as a methodology for military preparation, what is the conclusion? If we look at it on the whole as to whether or not CrossFit can be a good training tool, if it is kind of the central core guideline and directing force for someone prepping for either the Royal Marines or any part of the military, my conclusion is this: it can work, but it ain't the best. If, however, it is something that you love and you just love the CrossFit brand and you do love that kind of training and you want to do it, you know, at a CrossFit box in groups, then absolutely by all means crack on. Just in my opinion, my prescription is be mindful of a couple of things. Do not develop too much time, effort, energy and money into getting good at Olympic lifting variations, because you can get just as strong and powerful in other less dangerous and time-consuming and complicated and mobility and technique dependent ways and exercises. If you mess around with paused and explosive box squats and some banded trap bar deadlifts, and then trust me, you are absolutely golden. You're not gonna get anything from a clean that you're not gonna get from that. And secondly, as I've just ranted about, please, please, please stay away from high rep plyometrics when they are used as a conditioning tool. This is something that I don't suggest that people tweak, I just suggest that people stay away. The reason for this is incredibly clear to me. You are not the average Joe. You are somebody that is about to undertake a hugely demanding set of physical activities and challenges. And you don't want to be even a little bit damaged or worn down when you start training, when you start in the foundation block, because it will rear its ugly head at some point in that 32-week process. Mate, there's a lot of information. I need a drink. A lot of info there, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Please do let me know if you have any comments or suggestions or kind of, again, requests for anything else you'd like me to cover on this topic down in the comment section below. But I really hope you did enjoy today's video. And as always, beautiful people, stay strong, stay healthy, stay awesome, and peace out for now. See you soon.